It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. And of course, it's Monday today, which means Agronomic Monday. We're going to be joined by Peter Pete Johnson as always. We're going to find out if it's going to stop raining ever in Eastern Canada. Get a bit of an update on some of the conditions out here out west. Things are looking very green, much better than they were, let's say, about a month ago. And we'll cover a number of different topics. But Pete and I want to ask him about gene editing as well. We're also going to hear an interesting story that newcomer to RealAgriculture, our new Alberta field editor, Amber Bell, story that she's been working on, which is talking to Ralph Thrall III of the McIntyre Ranch, which is a very, very prominent ranch in southern Alberta and western Canada. And they've just done something very, very interesting. They've signed a permanent conservation easement on 55,000 plus acres of their ranch. What does that mean? Why did they do it? What are some of the restrictions? And just it really kind of uncover more of this story. So you're going to hear that audio here today on the program. And we'll also have time today for the top ag news stories of the day. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, or you can call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Want to make sure that you check out the Agronomist tonight. That is RealAg in prime time. It's 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain. You can find it by going to realagriculture.com/live, or, of course, the Real Agriculture YouTube channel is also a great place to catch it. Tonight's topic is zone management. Very fascinating. Of course, I don't care if you're farming in Western Canada, Eastern Canada, or the U.S. This is a topic very applicable to you. So two great guests that Lindsay has put together. You're going to hear tonight from Wes Anderson of Croptomistic Technology, as well as Johanna Lindenblum of Clark Agri Services. Johanna. We'll go with Johanna. That sounds better. And it's going to be a great discussion. So kind of looking at just how do you properly set up zones? What are the right ways to do it? And what do those zones actually really tell you in terms of making better decisions? And this is a great example of where, we can get lots of data. We can have lots of data at our disposal, but actually, can we do something with it is really a much more effective question, and zone management fits into that. So I'm looking forward to hearing tonight from what the two guests have to say. Like I said, 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain, and you can also get your CCA CU credits too by watching the program. Okay, let's jump into Agronomic Monday. When we come back, we're going to hear from Peter Pete Johnson right after this.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify.
I am Lindsay Smith. Joining me now is Rob Meyer for Genesis Fertilizers. We can't have this conversation without, of course, an update on where the Genesis plant is at as far as plans.
An announcement, many probably know this, was recently made to expand the production capacity of the nitrogen plant in Belle Plaine. A plant with the capabilities to provide not just urea, but also urea ammonia sulfate, the UAS, as well as the DEF, that's the diesel exhaust fluid component, with future plans now in play to install the equipment and also produce UAN. So if you really think about it, that package, these upgrades are not only going to make the plant more flexible, I think that's a key ingredient, but more profitable for the farmer owners. We're entering the spring. Farmers are thinking about their businesses, their crop plans, their fuel, their fertilizer. We're right in the mix of it right now with, incredible experts, and we're pushing this project. It's a great time to be on board.
And Rob, for those interested, where can they go for more information?
Visit us at genesisfertilizers.com.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday. And like always, we're joined by Peter Pete Johnson. Hey, Pete, how's it going?
Yeah, going awesome. Thanks, Shaun. Oh, I wish the heck it would stop raining. Oh, my gosh. Wheat Pete has zero crop in the ground, and I am not alone. Lots of growers that I talk to have not turned a wheel. It all depends on how much rain did you get, what's your soil type, and how much tile do you have in the ground. So huge differences between areas and regions, and tile drainage is paying. I have tile drainage, but it just hasn't been enough for me yet.
Yeah, well, that tile in years like this, it definitely does pay for itself. Hey, do you want to use a PGR in your cereals but no time for a separate pass? Manipulator PGR can be applied as early as 1 tiller. Just add it to your herbicide to reduce lodging risk, increase harvest efficiency, and, of course, maximize yields. Talk to your local retailer for more information and to confirm acceptable tank mixes. So, Pete, like you were just mentioning, it's been a pretty wet bias in central and eastern Canada.
Yeah, extremely wet. Actually, to the point now, Shaun, where growers have come to the decision or are making the management call that there's no chance they can get the corn in the ground before it's time to switch hybrids. And so hybrid switch has actually already started. Now, understand that there's nowhere in Ontario we need to switch hybrids until May 20th. And what are we today?
That's only a week away, though. Like that's only a week away.
Yeah, I know. So we're close, but a lot can happen in a week if the tap would just turn off. But the forecast is ugly. And if you're in the rain zone, I talked to a grower this morning, and I was sitting in, kind of cloudy, but some sun breaking through where I was. He was getting another thunderstorm, and it seems if you're in those thunderstorm corridors, they just keep happening and happening and happening, and it is no fun when you can't move in the field.
Okay, so considerations if you are thinking about switching corn hybrids, what are some of the things going to roll through your head?
Yeah, so it really does matter. There's a whole lot of things. First off, are you a hog feeder feeding that grain yourself? Because if you're a hog feeder, test weight doesn't matter. And if test weight doesn't matter, we've learned multiple times that low test weight corn is just about as good a feed as high test weight corn. So if you're feeding it yourself, you don't get nearly as worried. If, on the other hand, you're in a short season area and you're selling it to an end user that demands high test weight, high quality. And so if you're in Eastern Ontario, if you're in the Dundalk Highlands here in like the shorter season areas in Ontario, man, test weight is a big, big deal for a lot of those growers. So then you have to start thinking about changing more quickly. And then the other part of that equation, Shaun, is when will you get it in the field? Because if you think you'll get it in by May the 22nd, and the switch date is May 20th, you actually don't have to switch at all. But if you don't think you're going to get it in till June the 8th, well, now all of a sudden from May 20th till June the 8th, you have to switch to a much, much shorter maturity hybrid. And it's not May 20th for everyone in Ontario. It's May 20th for the short season areas. In my area, it's actually May 25th, maybe even pushing towards June the 1st. When we get down in the long season areas, it's at least June the 1st, maybe even June the 5th. So where you're sitting in the province makes a big deal. What your end use makes a big deal. Whether or not you have your own dryer, I didn't mention that, but if you have your own dryer, you can probably get away with higher moisture corn a little bit better than a guy like me that drops it at the elevator and drying costs become a bigger factor. And so lots of things to consider from that standpoint. The one other caveat that I will say, though, Shaun, is, you know, if it's well sown on May the 25th, it's probably going to out yield budded in on May the 12th.
Yeah.
And so, like this late season, guys get wanting to push it, and I mean, you can only wait so long, but you plant it in the mud, and it's just not generally a good outcome, especially if it turns dry after you plant.
Well, Pete, I'll tell you what, things are looking a lot better out west. Now, they're not perfect, but it looks massively better than it did a month ago. It's I am thinking, I don't want to be hyperbolic about it, but these coulees here in the Lethbridge area, now remember, we're in the belt of where it's been the driest. They are green as can be. It is, it's actually kind of refreshing. It's nice. Things can get green.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not everywhere in Western Canada, right?
No, it's not. It's not. But some of the most impacted areas, definitely. Like we had Ann Wasco here, who ranches in East End. She was on the show on Friday, and you know, like she said, you could pretty much hear the grass growing, and they're in, you know, a very, very dry area traditionally. So it's good. I think, and there's more. You know, it's interesting. It was a beautiful weekend for a lot of the West, and now temperatures are going to cool through this week, and there's a chance of more showers or rain, depending on where you are in different parts. So, and again, I think farmers, you know, we're in the middle of May here, so everybody wants to really get rolling. But I think the attitude, or some may disagree with me, but I think the attitude is I'll take the moisture, baby.
Yeah, come on, Shaun. If you're in Lethbridge, why is the wheat not in the ground? You had lots of chance.
Well, yeah, but we have
in
other crops, Pete. It's like canola and corn. We have other stuff to put in the ground besides just wheat.
Well, okay, but if wheat should be in the ground and it should be benefiting from this moisture, and you know, canola, corn, who cares? Drive on.
Hey, tomorrow on the show, Lindsay's going to have Paul Hermans from Corteva on the show to talk about swapping out corn hybrids as well. So I'm sure Paul and Lindsay will continue on this conversation of hybrid switching. Hey, big news last week. Canada did the third and final approval when it comes to gene editing. And we talked about this on Friday's show on the Real Ag Issues panel. Big news, very, very positive. We do have a poll up at Real Agriculture asking the audience, what problems do you want gene editing to address first? And Pete, I'm not sure this is a surprise. Well, I guess, what would you think as a farmer? What issue do you want gene editing to tackle? And then I'll tell you what the most popular one was.
Yeah, so I think gene editing, if the biggest thing that we can probably hope for from a gene editing standpoint, an immediate win for agriculture would be disease resistance. And so we can do pretty significant things with gene editing around disease resistance. There's a whole bunch. And by the way, Shaun, huge win for agriculture that this was determined to be a non-genetically modified program or methodology, so to speak, because it just means we can do things without that same pushback around GMOs. And I think it's appropriate, because all we're doing is knocking genes out, or, you know, that right now CRISPR technology, the gene editing technology, really is about knocking genes out or silencing genes. We're not really good yet at building genes in. So higher yield, that would be awesome, but that's super complex. Where disease resistance is often, you know, a single gene or 2 or 3 genes, so much more doable from a gene editing standpoint. And if we could get, you know, disease resistance to some of the rust genes, for example, in wheat, that would be a huge win.
Well, boost yield was actually the second lowest voted item so far. Okay.
Wow.
Only 3% of respondents have said yield, which kind of surprised me. The number one answer, okay, well, actually, you know what? You mentioned diseases. So 15% said cereal diseases like fusarium. 8% said root rots like Aphanomyces. The number one response was actually nitrogen fixation, or need or use of nitrogen by the plant. So there you go. By quite a bit, like by double of, like second place was drought at 17%. So essentially nitrogen fixation was double the second place one.
Yeah, the problem is that that's not an easy one from a gene editing standpoint. And you kind of take and say, okay, we're going to get corn to fix its own nitrogen, wheat to fix its own nitrogen. Well, how much photosynthate does that take from the plant, and how much does that reduce yield because that photosynthate goes to fixing nitrogen as opposed to adding yield to the plant? And you look at soybeans, right? The soybeans will yield 50 or 60 bushels per acre. Corn will yield 200 or 250 bushels per acre. Well, part of the reason soybeans yield less is because they fix their own nitrogen, and there's a cost to that, Shaun. So while it's a great target, we also need to respect kind of the impact that might have. Now, if we could get a free living bacterium in there to do the job for us that didn't steal photosynthate from the plant, that would be awesome. But I don't think that's going to happen with gene editing. I just don't.
Yeah, and I'm trying to hook up an interview with a plant breeder that is doing a lot of work in gene editing in Canada, and hoping to do that on next week's show. If I added up all we have 3 disease options. If I add those 3 up, they actually add up to around 34%, which would be, so we have about a tie for first place. So as many people thinking disease as the nitrogen one. So, that's kind of interesting where people think some of the priorities should be. And like you said, all these aren't equal when it comes to cost or time and the impact, right? So that's making it more complicated than the poll needs to be. It's just kind of a fun poll to see what people think would be kind of the key priority out there. Like you said, it's a big win. It's a big win.
Huge win. Yeah, huge win. Thank goodness. It's nice to have a win once in a while, Shaun.
Well put. Okay, we're going to take a break. We've got more coming up here with myself, Shaun Haney, and Peter Wheatpea Johnson. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Hi, it's Bruce with Ag Direct Hail Insurance. This season, Ag Direct Hail is proud to support prairie farmers by taking the unprecedented move of keeping our crop hail insurance rates at or below 2023 prices. With the many challenges facing farm families, this is our way of thanking producers who work hard to put quality food on our table. You have our back, and Ag Direct has yours. Visit agdirecthail.com or call us toll-free. We appreciate your business.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. It's Agronomic Monday. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of Real Agriculture. Vatterstad is partnering with Canadian farmers for outstanding emergence. Pete loves emergence. Their line of tillage, seeding, and planting equipment offers solutions for all soil types, field conditions, and tillage practices, helping you to maximize yield. To learn more and to find your local dealer, visit vatterstad.com. Pete, I wanted to, you were talking during the commercial break about, because of the wet weather, people not being able to get in the fields, that there's some weeds really growing. And I have noticed as well, as I was driving through the countryside on the weekend, not sure why, but there's some people really letting in some of their unseeded fields yet, really letting those weeds grow bigger than they probably should be. And there's maybe, there's isolated reasons for that. We know that we need to take care of those weeds ASAP. Critical, right?
Yeah, 100%, Shaun. And I mean, even on my own farm, I was hoping to get my soybeans planted before I needed to do a burn down and catch the burn down with the residual, save a pass over the field. I texted my custom operator, Bernie, this morning and said, ain't going to happen. Get out there with the burn down because the weeds are getting too big and we just can't let that happen. So there's a few things about that. Number one, big weeds are way harder to control. And we know that. And so that means you can't shave rates. You have to up your rate, or at least, keep a good solid rate. The other thing is that on big weeds, particularly some of the new weeds that we deal with from a resistant standpoint, you really need to get excellent coverage. So fleabane is bolting. When fleabane bolts, if you don't get good coverage, you don't get control. The water hemp is getting big. As water hemp gets big, and you think, oh, it's a 2-inch water hemp plant. Who cares? It's a 4-inch hemp plant. Well, that's no difference. If you look at the difference, a 2-inch water hemp plant, it might have, 4 growing points or 5 growing points. You get a 4-inch water hemp plant, it could have 28 growing points. And 28 growing points and trying to get control on all 28 growing points is way more difficult than on 4 growing points. So all of this says, get it done. Probably Wheat Pete should have called his custom app guy a week ago, but a week ago I was still thinking, yeah, might happen, close. So, I'm a bit behind the 8 ball. We're adding 2,4-D into the mix to make sure that we get control of the bigger weeds. We're, up your water volume. And if you're using a contact herbicide like Heat or Aragon, something like that, to get control of something like fleabane, then fine droplets, if you can at all, smaller droplets give you better control, better coverage, and don't shave the rate. That's all. Like you really, a totally different strategy when you get into this situation.
I can't find the email, but I did have somebody that had reached out a number of weeks ago and pointing out that they were using, I think it was herbicide stacking and herbicide layering interchangeably, and then they realized that that's not necessarily the same thing. So multiple modes of action in the tank is, on that path. That's stacking.
Right, that's stacked.
The layering is something else. So can you work us through the difference?
So layering is where we go out with 2 modes of action in the tank the first pass, and then we come back with another different mode of action. We actually use this fairly often with water hemp. It's quite common in the U.S. and you will go out with something like Zidua to try to get the late germinating water hemp. I mean, all of these different weed species, right, Shaun? They all have different germination windows, or how long they'll germinate. And so you get it good. I mean, if I go out there right now and we do a super job on the burn down, well, that's great. But if I have water hemp, guess what? The burn down gets the emerged water hemp. Even with some of the residuals, I don't get very long residual. I might get 2 weeks. So layering is where in 2 weeks time or 3 weeks time, I go back through with another, often soil residual herbicide, to try to extend that window of control and get some of the later germinating ones and let the crop get up bigger and give me better crop canopy control.
Okay. And so both they're different tools or different strategies. They're not, and they can, obviously they're used kind of, the herbicide stacking fits into the herbicide layering strategy. So they are related, but I think it's important to point out they are different. Also, we just filmed a herbicide layering video for the Pulse School.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it's used obviously in Western Canada as well. The weeds the one thing's for sure, Pete, the weeds just keep on coming. There's flush after flush after flush.
Yeah, and it depends on the species, right? Some will germinate basically all year long. Other ones, common ragweed, most of the time you get 1 or 2 flushes. The 3 at the most, and if you can get on top of those, you're okay. Water hemp, not so much. Pigweed, not so much. Can germinate over a very, very long window.
You also mentioned that growers are getting kind of frustrated because for whatever reason, when they are doing some tillage here this spring in Ontario, that they're not very happy about how the soil's working up. What's going on? What's unique about this year?
Yeah, and we're not 100% sure. There's been lots of discussion, and it's kind of funny, Shaun, you started the segment off with Vaterstat and emergence and tillage, and I'm thinking, yep, perfect segue into the fact that so many growers I talk to are just frustrated. They're going out there, the first pass over the field, it's hard. In fact, some growers saying that it's gone so hard that the cultivator doesn't even want to go in the ground in the hard spots.
Ooh.
And yeah, like, so they go to the high-speed disc, and the high-speed disc, all that does is bring up lumps. So dry on top and clay bricks underneath is sort of the place that many growers find themselves in. And when they do the tillage, one grower actually tweeted out, Matt Underwood, super guy, just a really sharp guy, as his master's worked for Syngenta, has gone home to farm and really has a good feel. And he said it's to the point where I swear even the planter is pulling harder after we've done the tillage. And I've had a couple of great chats with growers where the cultivator isn't doing the job. They go over the field with the high-speed disc, and then they kind of beat the lumps down. They pull the cultivator out to make the final pass, and all it does is bring all those. It's to the point where we're sort of thinking, you run over it, and 6 hours later or something like that, you want to be there with something that's gonna hit those lumps before they go hard. They have to dry out enough that they'll fall apart when you hit them. But, we were even looking at the roller, for crying out loud. We're going to go over the field with the roller after that high-speed disc, once those lumps are just at the right stage, so that we can try to get them to give us a nice aggregate-sized seed bed that will. My one neighbor always says, you just got to cuddle that seed. You just got to cuddle that seed. Man, you don't cuddle the seed in lumps, baby. So lots of growers just saying, wow, this is not going as easily. My own case, my strip till, yeah, I do, by the way, Shaun, I do have a line, and I've purchased a chaff spreader for my combine, but I wish I owned it last year. Oh, yeah, come on. You walk, or you talk the talk, you should walk the walk. And I finally found one, but I can't believe this year where the chaff, the straw windrow year, those strips are just not drying out. The strips in between are gorgeous, and it's just that kind of a year. So even Wheat Pete, who is a real do less tillage guy, is finding the same thing from a tillage standpoint.
Yeah, I've talked about this before, that when it comes to tillage, all tillage is not created equal. And based on the year's conditions, you may need a different tool. And that's what makes it kind of challenging to have the right tool at the right time, because, like costs, like if you're only using that one implement once every 5 years, you're like, it's not worth it, right? So that's where if you got a neighbor that has that specific tool, suck up to that person.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's just tough to always hit it perfect. Last year, my strip till I had the world by the tail. This year, not quite so much. I still think the spreader, the chaff spreader will fix that problem, but no, she's tough. And when you ask kind of why that is, we wonder if it was the pounding rains we had in March. February was warm, dry. We had some real pounding rains in March and not much freeze thaw action after that. So that's the question. Either that or we just didn't have enough freeze thaw action. But the maple syrup crop was awesome, which means we should have had lots of freeze thaw action. I think we've just had too many pounding rains in either late March, early April, and that just seems to turn things hard and tough.
I was talking to a friend of mine who's a potato grower in southern Alberta, and he was talking about how, one of the pieces of ground, the farmer had corn, and then they cut the corn, and then they put all the cows out. And so then you get this mat, right? The cows push it all down, and then trying to get that soil, that seed bed ready for potatoes here in the spring. Like, he just talked about how that's a nightmare.
Yep, no, absolutely. That's the challenge. We want the residue left on the soil surface if we can, because that's how we build organic matter. That's a help to it's not the only way we build it, but we certainly would like it there. But then if you put it on the soil surface as a mat, it's a blanket, and you know what blankets do? They insulate.
Yeah.
And if you insulate that soil so it doesn't dry out, on a dry year at Lethbridge, it might be okay, but on a wet year at Lethbridge, good job.
Yeah, no, that is for sure. So what do you got on tap this week? You just hanging out in that truck that you're sitting there in there right now, just your command and control kind of management and just barking orders at people, or do you get out of that truck?
John, I am only sitting in the truck so that I can talk to you and we can do radio, for crying out loud, man. I've been scouting fields. We're looking for stripe rust. We've got powdery mildew showing up. There's lots of physiological fleck in the wheat crop. I will be scouting. We're timing T3 sprays, fusarium sprays on winter barley for this week. So things are happening, whether Johnson can plant or not. Lots on the go in the field. And no, I don't just sit in this truck all the time, as much as most people think that I do.
Okay, we'll have to take his word for it, everybody. I don't know. We'll believe him this time. Hey, Pete, have yourself a great week, okay?
Yeah, you as well, Shaun. Thanks so much.
Great stuff. That is Peter Wheat Pete Johnson, of course, host of Wheat Pete's Word. New episode drops every single Wednesday, so check that out wherever you get your podcast. Okay, when we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to talk, we're going to hear from Ralph Thrall III of McIntyre Ranch in southern Alberta. They just signed a conservation easement on 55,000 acres. We're going to hear about that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
It's now time for a product spotlight, joined right now by Lauren Cummin. She's the Director of Policy at Seeds Canada. Okay, we're going to talk about a very important topic, and that is seed regulatory modernization. What needs to happen from your point of view?
Well, right now, Seeds Canada is talking and has been talking for quite a while about the need for balanced, refreshed governance in the seed regulatory system. To allow us to keep pace with innovation, our framework needs to allow for continuous improvement. An independent advisory committee will not only provide a framework for consultation, but it also provides a balanced governance structure that reflects the modern seed sector today. And the sector is concerned that rather than focusing on these bigger picture pieces that are going to get us to where we need to be, we're focusing on minor edits to what we already have, and in some cases, proposals to even go back in time. We really want to see a return on investment for everyone's time and resources going into SRM. We want to be able to compete moving forward.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. This segment is brought to you by the new Oxbow cereal broadleaf herbicide from New Farm. Oxbow is powered by duplasm technology that is a workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds in wheat and barley. Make sure you go to newfarm.ca to find out more. We're now going to hear an interview with Ralph Thrall III of the McIntyre Ranch down in the deep depths of southern Alberta, right on the U.S. border. Now, Ralph's family owns the McIntyre Ranch, which is a legendary ranch in Western Canada. They just did something here in the past couple of weeks that is quite fascinating. They did a permanent conservation easement on 55,000 plus acres. And Amber Bell, who is a newcomer to Real Agriculture, had a chance to catch up with Ralph, and here's the conversation.
Hi, Ralph. Thanks for joining us on Real Agriculture. It's so good to have you.
Hey, thanks, Amber, for having me. Happy to be here.
So, you run and own a 22,000 hectare ranch, McIntyre Ranch, down south of Lethbridge. Is that correct?
Correct. My siblings and I'm the oldest of four children to our parents. So my younger sister and two younger brothers and I jointly own the McIntyre Ranch now since my mother's passing a couple of years ago. You said hectares, and hectares is a new language for me. I talk in sections, 87 sections,
Mm-hmm.
or 55,680 acres. But now we've spoken most languages
Okay,
in
all
in
the
our
languages.
in our country. Yes.
Right. And that's a really large chunk of land. So, Ralph, can you tell us a little bit about the history of McIntyre Ranch?
Yeah, the property was established by William McIntyre in 1894, and apparently he had come up from Texas over a 4-year period to see the various seasons before establishing the property that it is today. How the Thrall family got involved was my grandfather became close friends with Billy McIntyre, was the best man at his wedding, was an employee of his, kind of as secretary treasurer, which I think maybe today's terminology might be controller. And so they had a 30-year relationship. And when Billy passed away in 1947, the McIntyre family no longer wanted to own the property. So my grandfather purchased it in 1948. So it's
Okay.
been in the McIntyre's stewardship for 53 years, and now in our family for 75, 6 years, whatever the math is there.
You guys just signed an agreement with the Nature Conservancy of Canada and Ducks Unlimited to preserve that land in pasture land. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. It's been a long time in the making. Conversations go back initially 30 plus years ago when the notion was broached. No, my father at the time was not prepared. It was not a short-lived, relatively short-lived conversation. I became involved in the operation back in sort of originally 1987, then took over managing in 1990. And by this time, my father decided that any future conversation with Nature Conservancy Canada would be directed in my direction. So I've been having the long-standing sort of the relationship with Nature Conservancy, and then in most recent years, back in right at the front end of COVID, which is a nice reference point, I guess, is when we really, the four of us, my siblings and I, got more really focused on the conversation, and we didn't let off the pedal. We've completed the easement, and the fundraising campaigns now have been completed, and now we're moving forward with the data collection. Part of the process is data collection on the property, grass species, plants and grasses, insects, amphibians, mammals, reptiles. And this is to now, again, I will say something that we've been working towards all along, and that is optimizing the habitat for the grass and wildlife.
So what made you choose to go with conservation easements?
I view the McIntyres as pioneer conservationists. What they experienced coming up from Texas through the Midwest was a lot of overgrazing. And by this time, the bison had been, by and large, kind of eliminated and replaced with cattle and sheep and such. But they recognized the overgrazing, and I think what they recognized was sustainability is what I think they came to realize, is that you can't take all of the grass. You need to leave some. That is a very important thing for sustainability.
Right.
And that legacy that they began has continued through our family. That's what it comes down to. It's without the grass, it's not taking care of anything at the end of the day. So modest grazing, relatively speaking, compared to, I'll say, average. I think typical is, again, unfortunately has hurt and taken away and destroyed a lot of the native species of our grasslands and wildlife habitat. And So this is just how my siblings and I were raised, I guess, to appreciate this is what it was, and we're just carrying on. So effectively, putting an easement on it, on the property, was effectively accomplishing this to make sure it doesn't change. And through over the course of the last few years, I've learned a lot through our relationship with Nature Conservancy and Ducks Unlimited, and one of those is that pretty much 80% of our country, of our grasslands, has been converted, largely to farmland, and then other cities and other industry. So for us to have an easement on it just makes sure it will not be converted. It will still provide something for the planet that used to be here in considerable abundance, that does play very important roles in carbon sequestration, along with the habitat for other species that have been displaced by other cultivation and other things.
That's great. And what does the agreement that you have with Ducks Unlimited and the Nature Conservancy of Canada actually entail?
There's relatively few, I'll say, restrictions, if you will. The one is no conversion to farmland per se, or we can't put windmills on it. We can't put solar farms on it. Mm-hmm. That's in essence the biggest one. The little ones are we can't game farm. Okay. That's one of them. There's 5 or 6 restrictions. Subdivision is another one, and that's again another one to another pressure is to subdivide, big or small properties into spaces for acreages for humans to live, for example, and take away that habitat for other species. Other restrictions, limitations is again that development overall. Talking about cultivation, can't cultivate. Other limit the development of other buildings and structures and roads and trails. Those are the primary limitations. The easement really doesn't change for us. I guess why it partly made sense for us is we wanted it to stay this more raw, natural thing. We don't want development. And so really grateful to have entities like Nature Conservancy and Ducks Unlimited that permit this thing, enable us and other landowners to preserve things in the way that they used to be.
Right. So your current grazing methods, those are fine within the easement?
Yes, the limitations, the restrictions really don't change how we go about doing our business. We still own the property. The easement stays on title if and when our family, they'll pass down through generations if that continues, or if this generation or future generations sold the property. These restrictions stay with the property. So any future landowners of the McIntyre Ranch have to abide by these restrictions.
And what does that easement mean for a ranch of that size? Because I know a lot of people that have looked into it are on smaller land bases. So being that size, that's a big chunk of land that is going to be kept in grasslands for a long time. So what do you see that as meaning for that amount of land?
When it comes to preserving really any amount of land, big or small, and yes, the McIntyre Ranch is unusually large. Average is considerably smaller, and they're all important in the grand scheme of things. They do add up. Nickels and dimes and pennies add up to bigger things. I think the 4 of us are really proud of ourselves for having really protected the McIntyre Ranch. For right or for wrong, what happens in 150 years or 1,500 years or 10,000 years, this is, for us, this is the right thing to do here and now today. It's the right decision for us.
Right. And so that agreement is in perpetuity. It's never ending.
Correct.
That's
yes,
great.
You said for a very long time. Yes, in perpetuity is a very long time.
So yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Ralph. And I feel like I could talk to you all day long, and it's been fantastic information. So thank you for sharing.
Hey, you're very welcome. Pleasure to share.
And we'll be right back here on RealAg Radio with the top ag news stories of the day right after this.
Choose Viatude fungicide and unleash best-in-class sclerotinia protection in canola and premium protection against white mold in soybeans. Viatude contains a powerful premix of Onmira Active and Prothioconazole. This unique combo delivers high-performance disease control, crop safety, mix compatibility, resistance management, and advanced mobility for excellent coverage and superior plant protection. Choose Viatude fungicide for stronger, more vigorous crops.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for the top ag news stories of the day, which today is brought to you by Envita. Now, Envita bridges the nitrogen gap all season long, enabling your corn crop to fix the nitrogen it needs from the atmosphere when and where it needs it most. Let Envita set your crop up for success by requesting it from your local retailer today. Envita doing a lot of cool stuff out there in the marketplace. Okay, let's get into the top ag news stories of the day here. And up first, USDA and the Department of Health and Human Services, the HHS, they've announced new initiatives to tackle the issue of highly pathogenic avian influenza in dairy cattle. The measures include providing personal protective equipment for workers with financial support for affected sites that participate in a study by the USDA and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Financial assistance includes up to $2,000 per month for sites providing PPE, $1,500 for developing biosecurity plans, and $100 for producers using an inline sampler in their milk systems. Additionally, up to $2,000 per month will be available for safe milk disposal, and up to $10,000 will cover increased veterinary costs. So the government providing some relief on some of the costs of trying to do some of the right things when it comes to biosecurity in the U.S. on these dairy farms. If you were following the markets last week, you heard about some of the cold weather in Russia. World Weather Inc. speculates permanent wheat damage from recent freezes is not likely to be more than 6%. Winter rapeseed likely suffered damage on 40% of the crop area. However, a much larger part of Russia's southern region in eastern Ukraine and western Kazakhstan is dealing with drought. Lost wheat production because of drought could be many times greater than which is lost from recent freezes. So there's a bit of an update on that. Modernizing the CBC. So this is a story in the Globe today. 7 multimedia experts have been selected to advise Heritage Minister Pascale Saint-Onge as she renews the role of Canada's public broadcaster. Canadian Heritage says the group will provide policy advice mainly on CBC Radio Canada's governance and funding. The department notes that consultations on the CBC's mandate have already been done with the general public. The newly appointed advisory committee will help the minister chart a path forward, with members contributing knowledge from a variety of fields. The minister says committee members have diverse perspectives and experiences that will help her modernize the public broadcaster. Ottawa wants to redefine the role of CBC before the next federal election as the Liberals hedge against the possible change in government. So what comes out of these consults? Who knows? What does that modernization actually look like? And a big question is going to be if there is a change in government, does the CBC even actually exist post federal election? That's a really, really good question. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of pressure on a conservative government to essentially go through with some of the thoughts in terms of totally a defund and making sure the CBC has to basically no longer be a crown corp and fight on its own devices. The Biden administration is reportedly preparing to impose significantly higher tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles and other clean energy products to protect American manufacturers. According to a report by the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. plans on Tuesday to increase tariffs on Chinese EVs from 25% to 100%, making it nearly impossible for these vehicles to be competitively priced in the U.S. market. This move is a part of a broader strategy to shield domestic industries from the competitive pressures on lower-cost Chinese products, which are often subsidized by the Chinese government. So there's a lot swirling around on this. So one is that there's very few Chinese EVs that even come into the U.S. So I heard one person talking about how this is just more political grandstanding than anything. Other people are saying, well, hey, wait a minute here. How do we expect to really have this EV revolution if we're not going to let in cheaper Chinese EV vehicles? We're just making this transition much more expensive for Americans. Of course, remember, we're in an election year, so all might be fine points, but in an election year, anything kind of goes in this regard as both parties. It's good politics to be tough on China. That's probably the best way to put it. There is another story in the Journal looking at chicken is reprising its role as the star of Americans' dinner plates. Stung by the rising price of beef, diners are buying more wings at fast food chains and frozen tenders at grocery stores. Meat giants like Tyson Foods, and Pilgrim's Pride, in turn, are bringing in higher profits from poultry as demand rises for their products and cost falls for livestock feed. Retail sales volumes of U.S. chicken products were up about 3% for the 52 weeks ended April 21st, compared with the prior year, according to market research firm Circana. Pork and beef were each down slightly. The share of U.S. consumers' income spent on food is at a 3-decade high, prompting people to shift spending towards cheaper private label items and cut back on purchases of some well-known brands. Last week, Tyson executives said that the shoppers are giving priority to essential items over beef and more expensive branded food products. Once again, based on the supply of beef can't afford this at this time. We've all been asking ourselves, hey, when can beef prices just be too high for people to say, hey, let's have beef for supper? Maybe those questions are starting to get answered a little bit. A dwindling supply of cattle in the U.S. means meat packers like Tyson are paying more to secure the livestock, raising wholesale and retail prices. Tyson executives said their ranches have yet to start rebuilding their herds. The retail price of ground beef was up about 12% in March compared with a year ago, according to federal data. And finally, France has been trying to do its best going back to 2008 to cut pesticide use. It is really, really failing, and environmental groups are really, really being critical. And they've got a new method. France's old system for measuring pesticides, which counted each dose of equally regardless of toxicity level, has been replaced with a European tool called the Harmonized Risk Indicator, which gives more weight to doses of dangerous pesticides. Critics say the new evaluation method, which does not provide information on how many doses are used, might make it seem like farmers are using fewer pesticides than they really are. Well, so the battle continues in France as they try to hone in pesticide use. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.